I can still hear the sound of silverware clinking against fine china, the low hum of laughter echoing through the dining room. The air smelled like roasted lamb and expensive wine, but all I could taste was humiliation. My father's voice cut through the noise, calm, precise, sharp. "You're not even worthy to shine her shoes." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. The table went quiet except for my sister's soft laugh, the kind that hides cruelty behind elegance. She didn't even try to look sympathetic. She just tilted her head, that smug smile stretching wider as if she'd been waiting all night for this moment. My stomach twisted, but I smiled back, because that's what I'd been trained to do. Pretend. It wasn't a random insult. It was his way of reminding everyone who mattered and who didn't. My sister, the perfect one. A lawyer, married into money, always making headlines in glossy magazines. Me, the disappointment, the dreamer, who left the family firm to chase something that didn't have a title or a salary big enough to impress him. I'd come home that night because it was my mother's birthday. The first one since she passed. I told myself I could handle them for one night. I was wrong. He raised his glass, eyes gleaming under the chandelier. "To success," he said, looking right at my sister. "To the child who makes this family proud." My heart clenched. I could feel my mother's empty chair beside me like a ghost in the room. She used to defend me, soften his cruelty with warmth. But now she was gone, and there was no one left to stop him. Everyone laughed, and I sat there frozen, my throat burning. I wanted to leave, but that would have made him win. So I stayed, silent, letting his words echo inside me until they stopped hurting and started turning into something else, something sharper. He thought that night broke me. He didn't realize it built something far more dangerous, because that was the night I stopped trying to earn his approval. That was the night I decided I'd let karma, and maybe a little help from me, speak louder than his pride ever could. The next morning, the sunlight that streamed through my apartment window felt different. Colder, harsher, as if it carried the echo of last night's humiliation. I replayed his words over and over until they stopped sounding like pain and started sounding like motivation. "You're not even worthy to shine her shoes." He said it so easily, as if those words had been sitting on his tongue for years, waiting for the perfect audience. I made coffee, black and strong, the way my mother used to drink it. She was the only one who ever believed in me. The memory of her gentle voice, telling me to keep building, to keep dreaming, felt like both comfort and a warning. She always told me, "Your father only respects what he can control." Maybe that's why he despised me. I had left his company, his world, his authority. My sister Olivia stayed. She thrived in it. She was everything he wanted, a mirror image of his ambition. He called her the future of the family. I was the ghost of its past, the one who walked away. But walking away didn't mean disappearing. For 2 years, I'd been building something quietly, something my father never bothered to ask about. He assumed I failed. He never checked the numbers, the clients, or the contracts. To him, I was still the reckless daughter with big ideas and no backbone. But my company, my little financial analytics startup, had started gaining traction. Not fast, not loud, but steady. I wasn't rich yet, not successful by his definition, but I was patient. That patience became my greatest weapon. I didn't want revenge, not then. I just wanted to prove I wasn't the failure he painted me to be. But that night, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just about proving him wrong anymore. It was about showing him what happens when you underestimate the person you tried to break. A week after the dinner, I got a message from one of Olivia's colleagues, someone I'd met briefly at a conference. He wanted to meet. He said he had a proposal that might interest me. I didn't think much of it until I saw the company name on his email signature. Astor Holdings, my father's company. The empire he built from scratch. The one he'd never let me touch because I was too emotional for leadership. I almost laughed. The irony was too perfect. I agreed to meet him. We chose a quiet cafe, one of those glass-walled places where the sound of espresso machines hides heavy conversations. He was nervous, kept glancing around before leaning in and whispering, "You didn't hear this from me, but there's talk your father's firm is bleeding money. Some bad investments. They're covering it up for now." I froze. I knew my father's pride. He'd rather burn the company down than admit weakness. If this was true, it meant his world was cracking, and nobody else could see it yet. When I got home, I sat in the dark, staring at the faint city lights outside my window. Part of me felt pity, another part, satisfaction. I didn't want to destroy him. Not yet. I wanted him to watch as the balance of power shifted inch by inch, until he had no choice but to see the daughter he mocked as his equal. Or maybe, his reckoning. I opened my laptop and began pulling data, tracing corporate filings, investor records, contracts. Years of working in finance taught me where to look for rot. Within hours I found it. The trail of inflated asset values, internal fund transfers, and irregular returns. My father's company wasn't just struggling, it was drowning. And my sister? She was listed as CFO. Her signature was on every questionable transaction. That's when the seed of revenge began to bloom. Not born from hatred, but from justice. My father humiliated me in front of everyone, thinking he'd won. He had no idea that the person he mocked at that dinner table was now holding the quiet truth that could shatter his entire empire. The next morning, I smiled for the first time in weeks. I finally understood what my mother meant when she said, "Sometimes, karma needs a little push." Over the next few weeks, my days blurred into nights filled with documents, numbers, and patterns only I could see. I didn't tell anyone what I'd found, not even my closest friend Maya, the only person who knew how deep my family wounds ran. I wanted this quiet, methodical. I wanted to understand how far the rot went before deciding what to do with it. At first, I thought it was simple. Risky investments, a few poor calls made by my sister, and my father trying to protect the company's image. But the deeper I looked, the more I realized this wasn't just carelessness. It was deception. Fake subsidiaries. Shell companies used to hide losses. Contracts routed through offshore accounts. My sister's name appeared everywhere, but she wasn't the mastermind. She didn't have that kind of mind. My father did. It became clear. He was using her as a shield. He'd made her the face of financial control, so if things went wrong, he could point the finger at her. And knowing Olivia, she'd defend him until her last breath. She always wanted his approval, even if it meant being his pawn. I began collecting evidence quietly, downloading public filings, capturing digital trails, cross-referencing fund flows. Every piece I gathered felt like reclaiming a little bit of the power he stole from me that night. One afternoon, I walked past their firm's downtown building. Glass walls, marble floors, the company name etched in gold letters, Astor Holdings. I used to dream of working there. Now, I was looking at it as the house of cards it truly was. Inside, people whispered about rumors, small layoffs, canceled deals. The tension in the air was thick, but my father still appeared on magazine covers, smiling, powerful, untouchable. The world didn't know he was crumbling from the inside. Then came the twist I didn't expect. My sister called me. "Dad wants to see you," she said flatly. "At the house, tonight." Her tone was strange, not arrogant, not cold, just tired. When I arrived, the dinner table was the same as before, except quieter. My father sat at the head, no wine, no laughter, just a folder in front of him. "I heard you've been digging into my company," he said calmly, not looking up. My heart skipped. He knew, I didn't deny it. Someone had to. "Your name is on those filings, Dad. If regulators catch it..." He slammed his hand on the table. "You think you're smarter than me? You think because you play with numbers, you understand what it takes to run an empire?" His voice rose, but underneath it I heard something new. Fear. He leaned closer. "You don't know what you're doing. Drop it." "That's not your world anymore." I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who once built everything from nothing, now trembling under the weight of his own lies. "That's exactly why it is my world now," I said quietly. For the first time, he didn't have an answer. When I stood up to leave, Olivia followed me to the door. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, her voice cracking. I paused. "Because he's done enough damage to this family, and because one day, you'll thank me for ending it before it ends you." That night, I sat in my car outside their gate for a long time, hands shaking but heart steady. The battle lines had been drawn. I wasn't just the daughter he mocked anymore. I was the woman who held the truth that could destroy him. And now that he knew it, I had no choice but to finish what I'd started. I thought the worst was my father. I was wrong. The true sting came from a place I never expected. My sister's steady, practiced voice, the one that sounded like family when she needed it to, but like a courtroom when she wanted distance. A week after our confrontation, I got a call that stopped me mid-stride. The number was blocked. I hesitated, then answered. "You need to come to the firm," a woman's voice said. "Now." It was official sounding, urgent. My stomach dropped. I raced across town, adrenaline and dread braided together. The boardroom smelled of polished wood and cheap cologne. My father sat at the head, expression unreadable. Olivia was beside him, not smiling, just cool, composed, the sister everyone liked to admire. Around the table, familiar faces, partners, counsel, two of the family's oldest investors. They looked at me like I'd walked into someone else's life. "We need to talk about your involvement with Astor," my father said. His tone was clinical, the voice of a man reading a prepared statement. My heart thudded. "I'm not involved with Astor," I said. "I'm the one who found the discrepancies." Olivia interrupted, and the sound of her voice felt like a blade. "You've been interfering where you don't belong," she said slowly, each word measured. "Accusing people without evidence, spreading rumors. If this is a battle for attention, it stops now." My protests felt childish. I tried to explain the transfers I'd traced, the shell companies, the off-book loans. I slid a folder across the table, copies of emails, redacted statements, dates, wires. I expected shock. I expected at least a pause. Instead, Olivia opened the folder, skimmed, and closed it with a small practiced sigh. "This is incomplete," she said, "sloppy. You've cherry-picked items to paint a narrative. We can't act on half-digested allegations. If you continue, we'll have to question your motives and your credibility." The room shifted. The oldest investor cleared his throat. "We can't have family drama on the balance sheet," he said. "If these claims disrupt our operations, we'll have to consider outside counsel." Outside counsel. The words landed like a verdict. They were building a wall between me and the truth I'd worked so hard to collect. When the meeting ended, my father didn't come to me. Olivia did. We stood in the marble hallway, the chandeliers glowing like accusations. "You're making a mess," she said, voice low. "You don't understand how fragile this is. He's trying to protect everyone." "Protect everyone?" I asked. "By hiding losses? By lying to investors? By letting people lose their livelihoods while he pretends nothing is wrong?" She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen, pity thinly veiled as strategy. "You always choose spectacle over survival. You want to be the hero. Real life isn't a story. It's a set of problems we fix quietly." Her words weren't meant to comfort. They were meant to shut me down. I felt anger rise, but beneath it was a bone-deep sadness. She had chosen him. She had chosen the empire and the life it bought her. She had chosen being safe over being honest. The next betrayal came faster, and it cut deeper. A week later, a rumor surfaced in the industry that I was under investigation for insider trading. An anonymous tip to a regulatory blog, a thinly sourced post that spread like wildfire. My inbox filled with curt requests, lawyers' letters, and the cold, distancing language institutions use when they want to wash their hands of someone. Olivia called again, voice soft this time. "You need to get legal counsel. I can introduce you to someone reputable." The kindness was performative. It wasn't an offer. It was a leash. When I dug into the source of the leak, the trail led where my stomach had feared it would. The anonymous tip had originated from a private email chain at Astor. Someone had copied internal memos and forwarded them to outside accounts. Someone had framed my research as malpractice and engineered the narrative that I'd manipulated information for personal gain. It felt like being buried alive. The people who should have stood by me, my family, the ones who knew me as a child who stayed up late solving puzzles, the ones who believed in my restless curiosity, had traded me for convenience. My sister had not only refused to listen, she'd helped steer the blade. That night, I sat in the dark and let the betrayal run through me like a slow, cold river. I pictured my mother's face, warm and kind, the woman who used to smooth out our fights with a gentle joke. If she were here, would she have let this happen? Part of me imagined her standing beside me, steady and fierce. The other part knew she wouldn't have been able to stop what was already in motion. There was one final blow. A letter from our family council arrived the day after the rumor broke. It was clinical, precise. Because of the allegations, due diligence recommended a temporary freeze on any dealings between my company and potential investors connected to the family. My bank accounts were flagged for review. My partners called, nervous and polite, then distant. Olivia sent a single message. "I'm sorry it had to come to this. Sorry." A word that pretends to heal, and instead opens the wound wider. That betrayal should have broken me. Instead, standing amid the ruin of my reputation and the cold calculations of my family, something clearer emerged. Betrayal had a sound. Not the loud cry I imagined, but the quiet click of doors closing. It showed me who I had been fighting, and who I would have to become to win. I wiped my face, breathed, and for the first time in months, I mapped the battlefield with a calm hand. If they wanted to make me out to be the villain, I would use that. If they wanted narratives, I would craft the one that would undo them. They thought exile and scandal would finish me. They had only given me the stage I needed. Karma, I decided, would not be random. It would be deliberate. When your family turns you into an enemy, revenge doesn't come from rage. It comes from precision. I spent the next few weeks in silence, letting the noise die down while I rebuilt my strategy. They thought the scandal would isolate me. But they underestimated one thing. Isolation gave me time. I started by reaching out to people who lived in my father's shadow. The ones he'd crushed on his way up. Former partners, ex-employees. A few who'd left Astor Holdings quietly with their dignity, but not their trust intact. Some ignored me. Most didn't. They remembered. They wanted to see him fall almost as much as I did. Through them, I got access to archives long buried. Meeting notes, old audits, private communications. What I found confirmed everything I'd suspected. My father had been moving company assets into personal accounts for years, masking losses by inflating subsidiary valuations. It wasn't just mismanagement. It was fraud, and Olivia, her signature wasn't just there for show. She had approved documents that diverted funds into shell firms under the pretense of strategic diversification. Whether she knew what she was signing or not didn't matter. Her name was on them, but revenge needed patience. If I struck too early, I'd look vindictive. The bitter daughter trying to bring down her family. So I played the long game. I rebuilt my credibility in small, calculated steps. I reached out to a journalist, not one of the gossip-driven types, but an investigative reporter I trusted from my early finance days. I told her everything, but without giving her names yet. I framed it as a whistleblower story about corporate ethics and family corruption. She listened. She wanted proof, so I gave her trails, not headlines. I led her toward the pattern without ever saying Astor Holdings. She started digging on her own, her curiosity doing the work I couldn't. When she eventually connected the dots, it would look like her discovery, not my vendetta. Meanwhile, I turned my attention to the financial regulators. I couldn't go through official channels, not yet. My name was still tarnished, but I could feed data anonymously. A few encrypted messages, carefully timed, using information anyone could find if they knew where to look. Then came the personal front. I knew Olivia wasn't evil. She was loyal, in a way that bordered on blindness. I had to make her see the truth, not just tell her, so I waited for the perfect opportunity. The firm's annual charity gala. Every year, my father loved to parade the company's success under chandeliers and champagne. This time he'd be doing it while his empire quietly rotted underneath. I got an invitation through an old acquaintance, a board member's wife who'd always pitied how my father treated me. I walked into that ballroom in silence, the same way I'd left his house that night months ago. Heads turned, whispers followed, but I smiled. Let them think I was shameless. Let them think I'd come to beg forgiveness. That made the reveal sweeter. I approached Olivia near the bar. She looked beautiful, tired and guarded. Her husband hovered nearby, pretending not to eavesdrop. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. I know, I replied. But you should see this. I handed her a small envelope. Inside were copies of transaction statements, the same ones she'd signed, along with a list of offshore accounts tied to their father's name. Her face drained of color. "This isn't true," she whispered. "It is," I said. "And when the regulators connect the dots, you'll be the one they call first." She blinked rapidly, panic rising. "Why are you doing this? You'll destroy him." I looked her straight in the eye. "No, Olivia. He destroyed himself. I'm just making sure the world sees it." I walked away before she could speak. I didn't need to. I'd planted the truth where it mattered most, in the heart of the one person still protecting him. 2 days later, the first article broke. Whispers around Astor Holdings, financial irregularities or corporate cover-up. It was subtle, elegant, exactly the kind of story my father hated. It didn't accuse him directly, but it lit a fire under every investor he'd ever courted. Calls started pouring into his office, questions he couldn't easily dismiss. He thought it was bad luck. He didn't realize it was karma with a strategy. As his walls began to crack, I didn't feel joy. Not yet. Just calm. Revenge wasn't the explosion people imagined. It was a quiet unraveling, one thread at a time, until the tapestry of power he'd woven around himself started to collapse under its own weight. And the best part? I hadn't even pulled the final thread yet. The fallout came faster than I expected. Within a week of the first article, 2 more followed, each one sharper, more specific, more undeniable. My father tried to control the narrative, issuing press releases, calling emergency board meetings, threatening to sue whoever was spreading lies. But the problem with lies is that they unravel when light touches them. And this time, the light was everywhere. Investors started withdrawing. Analysts began asking questions the company couldn't answer. The board demanded an independent audit. My father's perfect empire, the one he'd lorded over me for years, was finally cracking in public view. Olivia called me again, but her tone was different now. There was fear in her voice. "You have to stop this," she said. "They're tearing the company apart. Dad hasn't slept in days." I took a deep breath before answering. "He built this on deception, Liv. It was always going to collapse. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just refusing to look away anymore." She didn't reply right away. Then quietly, "He's scared of you." That stopped me. My father, the man who once reduced me to silence with a single sentence, now afraid of me. I didn't know whether to feel satisfaction or sorrow. A week later, the auditor's findings leaked. My father's personal accounts had indeed been used to mask losses. The report didn't just mention mismanagement. It suggested criminal misconduct. The media devoured it. The board demanded his resignation. The night before the board vote, he showed up at my apartment. I hadn't seen him since the day he told me I wasn't worthy. He looked smaller now. His suit immaculate. His posture still proud, but his eyes tired. He didn't ask to come in. He just stood at the door, holding a single sheet of paper. "You think you've won," he said. His voice was soft, not angry, almost hollow. "You've ruined our name. You've turned your sister against me." I met his gaze. "No, Dad. You did that the moment you decided your pride mattered more than the truth." His jaw tightened. "You'll regret this. You think the world respects you for what you've done? They'll move on, but your name will stay tied to mine. Forever." He left before I could respond. The door clicked shut, and for a long time I just stood there in silence, heart pounding. I wasn't sure if what I felt was victory or grief. The next morning the vote went through. He was removed as CEO. Olivia resigned quietly a week later, citing personal reasons. The press called it a family implosion. To them, it was a scandal. To me, it was an ending. I didn't attend the final board meeting, but I watched the press conference from my office. My father stood at the podium reading a prepared statement. His voice cracked midway just slightly, but I caught it. That tiny fracture. That was the sound of karma speaking. When the reporters shouted questions, he ignored them and walked off stage, expression empty. For the first time in my life, I saw him not as the powerful man who ruled our family, but as a fragile human being who couldn't face the mirror anymore. I closed my laptop, leaned back, and let out a shaky breath. I thought revenge would feel like triumph, but it didn't. It felt quiet, heavy, necessary. In the end, I didn't destroy him. I just showed him the reflection he'd spent his life avoiding. The silence after the storm was almost sacred. For weeks, no one spoke much in the house. My father stayed in his study, staring at the ledgers of a man who finally saw how his empire had been built on fear. My sister moved out quietly, leaving her smirk behind with the ghosts of our last dinner. I stayed. Not because I wanted to watch them suffer, but because I needed to understand what peace felt like after years of being small. And strangely, it wasn't loud. It wasn't fireworks or victory speeches. It was quiet mornings with sunlight on my desk, the sound of the kettle, the absence of insults over breakfast. When my father finally came to me one evening, his voice was soft, brittle even. He didn't say sorry, but he didn't need to. His eyes carried the weight of every word he'd thrown at me that night, and the shame of realizing his daughter had become everything he wasn't brave enough to be. I looked at him and simply said, "I'm not trying to prove you wrong anymore. I'm just trying to live without your voice inside my head." He nodded, and for the first time in my life, there was no fight, no judgment, just silence that felt like closure. Revenge wasn't about breaking him. It was about breaking free, and in that freedom, I found the version of myself he never wanted to see. Strong, steady, unafraid of being alone. Some scars never fade, but they stop hurting when you stop tracing them. My father's words once defined me, until I realized they were only echoes of his own fear. I learned that revenge isn't always about destroying someone else's world. Sometimes it's about rebuilding your own, brick by brick, without needing their approval. The night he mocked me used to be my deepest wound. Now, it's the night I stopped needing validation. No one deserves to be made small for shining differently. This is Revenge Untold, where pain meets power and silence becomes the loudest justice.